Hey YouTube, Brian here with a YouTube video starting my new channel that I will be obviously putting more and more time and more videos into as the time goes on. This is going to be a US political and economics channel for the most part, with other things that get thrown into that category like popular topics and world affairs like TPP or other things like that. So this is going to be a channel about that, and the reason why is because I'm a senior in high school. It's my second semester, so it's mandatory that everybody takes government to graduate, and it's generally considered a very senior class. So half of my class, so roughly 420, 450 kids, have already taken the class and are now on to economics, while obviously the kids in economics are now on to government. So I've been asking students, and it doesn't matter if they're like low GPA, average students, or AP students. Most of them can't describe to me the difference between a Democrat and a Republican unless they already had prior knowledge of politics and were already interested beforehand, which worries me because that means that whole semester they really didn't learn anything about our political system, since to really understand most of it you have to be able to tell the difference between a Democrat or a Republican. It's just such a basic concept that it's really scary to see that most of the kids don't understand. So my goal is to get a very short video, 10 to 15 minutes with the exception of this one, because of the long intro, to be filled with information with a little bit of humor so that it's a little bit lively and not just dead. And to educate kids instead of having an hour-and-a-half class staring at a PowerPoint, mindlessly jotting notes, to only regurgitate the information and throw it away once the test is over. And I really just want to educate kids. So that's why I'm starting it. So I'm going to start building up on how complex the topics are getting. But first, I have to start with the basics, and that's the difference between a Democrat and a Republican. But I have to go even more fundamental than that. And I have to wipe away the stereotypes that young kids tend to have when it comes to Republicans being the big bad guys. And there's a lot of stereotypes and myths about the Republicans that give them this personality that doesn't really exist. So I want to talk about it since I am a libertarian. I am on the right wing of things, while most of the other people that are in my entire peers are left wing. So I want to talk more and more about this from a right wing perspective and give a different point of view than what most of the kids already understand or think they understand. So with that being said, I want to take this video to debunk the stereotypes and the myths. Now, I will say right now, I'm only going to gloss over all of it because the myths have very specific things that I'm talking about in separate videos that will be in the future. So right now I'm just going to gloss over them. It's easier to paint the fence with a bigger brush, and it saves on a lot of time. It'll take this video from being 15 to 20 minutes instead of 2 hours. So with this video, like I said, I'm going to gloss over it, and then each topic will more than likely be individually discussed later on. So first one. Republicans are just a bunch of old white men. Not true. It is not. And let's take a big example why. A very easily seen example. Let's look at this graph right here. It's not much of a graph more it is a picture. And this picture easily shows the 2016 presidential candidates, and it shows the Republican side. On that side we can see Bobby Jindal, Ben Carson, Marco Rubio, Carly Fiorina. Doesn't matter if I mispronounce her name because she dropped. Thank God. And so they're all going against this stereotype where you have the Democratic side, which has the criminal, the socialist, the invisible man, and the man who dropped out so early he doesn't even get a nickname. So with all that being said, we can see from just the nominees alone that the Republicans are diversifying themselves in this whole section, and that the Republican Party isn't racist. Going on further, I want to talk about quickly why minority groups are more Democratic, because the Democrats are the minority voice and the voice of the young. Whatever. Why I want to talk about that quickly is because it's very important, and I want people to understand. Republicans tend to have a racist connotation around them, as one would say, because of their policies, where it's much stricter on immigration. They don't like illegal immigrants, and they don't like things like welfare, which, let's face it, a lot of minority groups use, and to an extent, some of them do take advantage of it. So, obviously, the dog's not going to bite the hand that feeds him. So, a lot of minority groups in that aspect will go to the Democratic side. As we can see from this Gallup.com, where this poll was taken, and quick note, all my sources will be in the description below. I cite everything I talk about. On this, you can obviously see it's by a big landslide, but it's very interesting to see how many turned out because of the Obama election. I'm really curious to see in the coming years, when people realize that the Republicans aren't the stereotype, how many more minorities will go to the Republican side. I'm really curious to see. Unless it's Trump, then I don't see any minorities going to the Republican side. But let's continue on. Oh, Trump. Let's continue on. Next one I want to talk about is that the Republicans are only for the wealthy. Now, out of all the stereotypes, this one can be the most, if you glance over things like the tax plans and stuff like that that the Republicans have, this one can be the most believable, yet there's reasoning behind why it exists and why it's false and could be considered true at the same time. On my left, I'm pulling up the tax plan of Bernie Sanders. His new tax brackets, he has a progressive tax, meaning the more you make, the more you get taxed. Most people agree with this system, or I should say, people do agree with the system. I'm not going to say most here. People do agree with the system for what some would say a logical reason. The more you make, the more you should pay. However, since he's a self-proclaimed socialist, he has taken on the initiative to tax well over 50% to the upper 1% because there's such bad people up there and they deserve to have half their stuff taken away from them because they are just that awful of people. And also, since a lot of them are business people and CEOs, let's also add a 7 to 8% payroll tax that's sure to increase in the coming months, because why not? Throw taxes everywhere, fund the government as much as you can. Bernie Sanders will be a great video that I will get to, hopefully very short, soon. I'm already so excited to talk about him and just utterly obliterate him. Anyways, moving on, we can see on the right I have Ted Cruz's tax plan. Now, please don't take this into mind that I'm voting for Ted Cruz, but I took his tax plan because it gets across the point that I want to make. Ted Cruz has something called a flat tax, and that's no matter how much money you make, you pay this much in taxes. Now, some would call this a fair method because I feel like a progressive tax punishes those who are successful and who have followed their dreams and become successful. And that's a logical argument. One can obviously argue that from that point, that you're getting more and more of your money, or a bigger cut of your money taken away, the more and more you make. So it kind of does, in a way, almost deter success, especially when over half your earnings are going to be taxed. Now, keep in mind that 10% and most flat tax plans come with 0 deductibles, which is a very important thing that we'll get to when we talk about taxes. But right now, let's just leave it at this, the 10% tax. Now, realize that according to the 2016 tax bracket, people who work 48 hours, 52 weeks a year, for all 52 weeks in the year, working 48 hours every week, at a minimum wage of $7.25, pay 15% in federal income tax. Now that's just the federal, so the states vary, but 15% federal income tax. With that being said, we can obviously see that with Ted Cruz's tax plan, they get 5% more of their money back. Now 5% might not seem like a lot, but when you're kind of pinching pennies, 5% is a much needed relief. And when you do things like that, then it leads way to more economic stability, because when people have that relief coming, they'll go out to eat more, or they won't buy the ramen noodles every day, and they'll buy more other sorts of higher end goods, or middle goods as some would call it, and they go out and buy more. That's just simple economics. When people feel more secure about their financial situation. Now, I'm not saying that they should be secure about their financial situation. They still are working minimum wage, probably at some superstore fast food restaurant, but they are still making minimum wage with 48 hours. So, also side note, they are above the poverty line. So, screw you, Bernie Sanders. They are above the poverty line. I'll pull up that graph. That'll also be in the description. But it doesn't mean they're gonna afford all the luxuries. But that's not the point. The point is to like hike up your boots, come to work every day, go for the raises, and even with the raises, you're still gonna only be paying a 10% flat tax. So it doesn't pain people for success. And it also puts more money in the wealthy's pocket, which is why people think Republicans are for the wealthy. But hear this out. The wealthy and the upper class are the people who can afford to build factories. When people build factories, they can employ mass amounts of people. When you employ mass amounts of people with huge factories, generally speaking, those factories are going to pay a lot more than some place like McDonald's. And when you have places like paying more like that, more people are getting out of the lower class into the middle class. And when the large corporations, the owners of them, so the upper class, as I said, have more money in their pockets, they go out and spend even more. Every class has its own role in the market. The upper class tend to be the one who build the factories. The middle class work in the factories, manage the factories, and make their way up to the upper class. And the lower class are really the people who are just, most of the time, people deserve to be poor. I've talked to many business people, and there's also business videos out there. Business owners want to pay good employees because it gives them incentive to work harder, to do more, to take the extra steps. So they want to pay good employees more. So good employees aren't going to be making minimum wage. Good employees will make more money. Ask a business owner. I'll put a link into Louder with Crowder, for instance. He was talking about this. He's a business owner himself, and he said he wants to pay good employees. Not the guy who comes in late because he said his iPod didn't wake him up with his alarm clock, but the guy who takes the initiative, gets all of his work done, and does extra. It goes above and beyond. That person will make it farther. That person will start getting $15 to $20 an hour. That's good. So with all this in mind, everybody has their role. And the Republicans want everybody to pay the same percentage. Not the same amount. Same percentage of tax. So that's why. And I'll get more into that later. More depth with a video to come about that later. Next point I want to talk about, which has become a wide point that I've seen on social media, and I wasn't going to actually include this until I've seen article after article after article about this, and it's about Republicans not caring about vets. Now, I honestly laugh at this because everyone says this because the Republicans didn't pass a bill that would fund the VA heavily, billions and billions of more dollars. It was created by Bernie Sanders, if I do believe so, and it didn't get passed, and a lot of Republicans didn't vote for this bill, and everyone's like, whoa, the Republicans don't want the vets to get taken care of, da 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 da. That's not it at all. The VA is a broken down system. There is a reason why veterans constantly make fun of the VA, constantly make shirts that make fun of the VA, and there's all these sayings about the VA within vets about why the VA is bad, and leftists argue that it's because it's not funded enough. Rights believe because the system's broken. I'll go more into the VA later in depth in another video. Like I said, just glossing over these things, and then I'll go into depth later. I just want to get these out and get people on a more open-minded level when I do talk about them. So the Republicans don't want to fund this, which all the Bernie Sanders supporters jumped on top of it and said Republicans don't care about the vets. That's not it at all. The Republicans just don't want to fund something that's failing with billions and billions of more dollars that vets don't even like, because it's just such a long process. The care is bad. It takes forever to get some. There's some veterans who are on the wait list for years at times, and it just doesn't get around to them. And sometimes veterans die on the waiting list waiting for their treatment, and that shouldn't be happening. And ironically enough, I'm going to let you take a long, hard guess on who that chairman is. Go ahead. Take your time. Take your time. Irony. So, more about that, and more about all this stuff, and I'll go into depth about stuff Republicans have tried to do, but Democrats would do filibusters because they wouldn't agree with the plan, and I'll go into depth about filibusters and all this other stuff. But I just, like I said, glossing over these topics so I can get all of them out of the way so people can have a more open-minded about Republican and right-wing ideology when it comes to those videos. So, Republicans not caring about veterans is complete bull. Last one I want to do is the fact that Republicans are just a bunch of uneducated farmers. Now, I've been told this, I don't know if it's a popular belief, to be honest. I've just been told this by people in my school that, oh, Republicans, they're just a bunch of uneducated farmers. Doesn't make any sense. Just doesn't. It doesn't make sense. Alright, bring up the polls. As we can see here, a lot of times the education is almost even, and sometimes on Gallup.com we see that it's actually Democrats who have less education in some aspects than Republicans, which is because the minorities lack the funding for their education, since a lot of them are living in poverty, which means they have a high dropout rate, so they have to live on welfare, which is funded by the Democrats, which makes them want to vote Democrat. You see this huge system that's going on? But let's look at the ones that I do want to point it out, because somebody's going to point it out in the comment section. I know it. When you look at this, they're like, oh, look at the post-grad. Oh my god, the post-grad. It's like 60% to 30%. Somewhere around there. And yes, I will admit, according to Gallup.com, the post-grad heavily vote Democrat. It's about 2 to 1, with 60% of the people in post-grad. Take into account, though, that roughly 6% to 8% of the actual American population has a post-grad. Now, I'm not saying this excuses it, but don't think of that huge gap meaning a huge part of the people. Realize that a lot of those people, most of them have masters. Alright, so most of them aren't PhD, so there's roughly 8% now that I remember, and roughly 6.5% have masters, and then the other 2% is broken up between your PhDs and other things. Now keep in mind that with this, a lot of these people are professors. Not a lot, but there is a portion of them who are professors. And when you already have such a small number, when the majority of the professors have to have something with a higher educational degree, like a post-grad degree, remember, I really want to make this clear, they are professors. Now when you go to colleges, that's a bunch of left-wing ideology. Funny how the institution that relies off government funding and government loans is a very much left-wing ideology promoter. Hey, full circle. So, with that, you have to remember that those numbers aren't false. They are the numbers, but you gotta look deeper into the numbers and realize that probably a good 1 to 2% of that 8% are professors, are teachers who are supported by government funding and loaning. Without that, they wouldn't have a job, because let's face it, not many people can pay for the tuition today, which I'm going to talk about in the Bernie Sanders and why that's actually happening, and why Bernie Sanders just needs to shut his mouth about free college, because as we all know from lesson number 1 in economics, which he must have been asleep for, there's no such thing as a free lunch. Oh my god, that man kills me. So I just want to get that out. Those are the 4 that I really wanted to talk about. Obviously, they're not a bunch of white old men. We're more and more, the Republican Party is getting more and more diversified as the years go on. They are not only for the rich, they have a different ideology. They want to put more money in people's pockets, literal money that they could feel by lowering their taxes, than helping them through government funding that was funded with money they took from the rich. It's practically wealth distribution, just in a different form, which is not good. It's not. It doesn't. It's a failing system. Look at Greece. Look at Greece. They do care about the vets. It's just the Bernie Sanders supporters tend to not think you do. Not think they do. Wow, English. And last point that I made is the bunch of uneducated farmers. And that's it. Those are the 4 main ones I just wanted to get. Obviously, there's more stereotypes. There's so many that to do that video, even the gloss over it would be in like a 30-minute video, at least. So with this video, I hope that when my newer videos come out and my videos that are much more in-depth about things dealing with politics, which I'm so excited to get to, I hope you enter with an open mind. If you are a liberal, not saying there's anything wrong with being a liberal, as long as you're an educated liberal, which, no offense, I don't come by those often. But it is good when I do come by one, because it's a great debate.